the glance of kindness. Rosa sat at her usual spot on the crowded city street, her frail body wrapped in layers of tattered clothing. She watched as the world rushed past her, indifferent to her existence. Life had been unforgiving, leaving her to fend for herself. The few coins she collected daily barely kept her fed. Yet in this bleak world, one person stood out. Tom, a tall, strong officer who passed by her corner almost every day. Tom had a quiet, commanding presence, his uniform crisp and his expression hard. He rarely spoke, but Rosa noticed the small gestures. A coin tossed her way, a nod of acknowledgement when their eyes met. For her, those moments were like rays of sunlight piercing the otherwise gray and cold world. She started looking forward to his brief appearances, her heart warming at the sight of him. One day, Tom stopped for longer than usual. He bent down and handed Rosa a sandwich, his eyes softening as they met hers. "You need to eat," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. Rosa was taken aback, unused to kindness. She managed a weak smile and whispered her thanks. From that moment, their encounters became more frequent. Tom never stayed long, but each time he passed by, he left something. Sometimes food, sometimes money. Rosa's feelings for him grew with each small act of kindness. She found herself waiting for him eagerly each day, her heart racing whenever she caught a glimpse of his uniform from afar. She started weaving dreams in her mind, imagining a life where she wasn't the poor beggar on the street, but someone who could be by his side. She knew it was a foolish fantasy, but in a life filled with nothing but loneliness and survival, it gave her hope. Little did she know, behind Tom's stoic expression and acts of kindness lay a life filled with secrets and danger. He wasn't just an ordinary officer. His job was a cover, a front for a more dangerous mission. Tom was part of a covert operation targeting a deadly gang that had been terrorizing the city. His life was consumed by deception, and he could never afford to get close to anyone, especially not someone like Rosa. But Rosa didn't know any of this. To her, Tom was a figure of safety, someone who saw her when no one else did. She clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, there could be something more between them. She had no idea how far from reality her dreams were, nor how dangerous they would soon become. Hidden intentions. The days turned into weeks, and Rosa's affection for Tom grew stronger. Every time he appeared, her heart would skip a beat. She kept her feelings to herself, knowing that someone like Tom would never look at her the same way. But hope, however irrational, was a powerful thing. She started to imagine a future, one where she wasn't just a beggar, but someone worthy of his attention. One rainy afternoon, as she sat huddled beneath her makeshift shelter, she noticed Tom walking toward her. This time, he wasn't in uniform. His casual clothing made him seem more approachable, almost vulnerable. He handed her a hot cup of coffee, which she gratefully accepted, her hands trembling from the cold. "Thank you," Rosa whispered, looking up at him with a shy smile. Tom nodded but seemed distracted, his gaze scanning the surroundings. She noticed a tension in his body, a restlessness she hadn't seen before. "Stay safe out here, Rosa," Tom said suddenly, his voice low. It was the first time he had called her by her name, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could respond, he walked away, his figure disappearing into the fog. His behavior seemed off, but she dismissed it, thinking that maybe he was just having a rough day. However, what she didn't know was that Tom had just come from a high-stakes meeting. His team had finally tracked down the gang's latest hideout, and the operation was set to go into motion soon. The streets that Rosa called home were dangerously close to where the gang conducted its illegal activities, and Tom knew that if things went wrong, she could get caught in the crossfire. As the days passed, Rosa began to notice changes in Tom. He became more withdrawn, his visits shorter, and his glances filled with unease. One evening, after he handed her a few coins, he spoke quickly in a hushed tone. Rosa, I need you to stay away from this area for a while. Things are going to get dangerous. His voice held an urgency that startled her. Dangerous? She asked, confused. What do you mean? I can't explain, just trust me, Tom replied, his eyes darting around nervously. Please, promise me you'll stay safe. Rosa nodded, though she didn't fully understand what he meant. The worry in his eyes left her unsettled, but she didn't press him further. She trusted him. He had never steered her wrong before. As he walked away, Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She felt a growing concern for Tom, unaware of the dark world he was navigating. Her love for him made her blind to the danger that lurked in the shadows, and she had no idea how deeply involved he was in a deadly game of cat and mouse. But curiosity began to gnaw at her. Why was Tom so anxious? What was he hiding from her? As much as she trusted him, Rosa's instincts told her that something wasn't right. She couldn't resist the urge to find out more. Into the shadows. Rosa couldn't stop thinking about Tom's strange behavior. His warning echoed in her mind, but with it came a surge of curiosity. Why did he want her to stay away? What was he involved in that made him so anxious? The more she thought about it, the more determined she became to find out what was really going on. Late one evening, as the city's lights flickered in the distance, Rosa made a decision. She was going to follow Tom. She didn't know what she expected to find, but her heart wouldn't let her sit by idly. She told herself it was because she cared about him, that she wanted to keep him safe, just as he had tried to protect her. Tom had told her to stay away, but she couldn't do it, not when something was clearly wrong. Eventually, she spotted him. Tom was standing at the corner of a dimly lit street, speaking with a man she had never seen before. The stranger was tall and his eyes darting around as if expecting trouble at any moment. Rosa could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She hid behind a dumpster, peeking out just enough to see what was happening. Their conversation seemed tense. Tom's usually calm demeanor was replaced with frustration. Rosa strained to hear their words, but the wind carried their voices away before she could make sense of them. All she knew was that this wasn't just some friendly chat. Something dangerous was happening. Rosa's heart sank. What was he doing? Was he involved in something illegal? The thought that Tom, the man she admired, could be entangled in a dark world filled her with dread. Before she could process it further, the conversation ended. Tom glanced around, his eyes sweeping the area. Rosa ducked down, holding her breath, afraid he might spot her. She heard his footsteps grow fainter as he walked away. Rosa's mind raced. She knew she should let it go, that whatever Tom was involved in was far bigger than her. But she couldn't. Her love for him blinded her to the danger she was stepping into. She told herself that if she could understand what was happening, maybe she could help him, pull him out of whatever mess he was in. That night, as she lay in her makeshift shelter, sleep wouldn't come. Her thoughts were consumed by the image of Tom with that strange man. She was in too deep now. She had to know the truth. The next morning, Rosa decided to follow Tom again, determined to uncover the secrets he was hiding. Little did she know, her pursuit of answers would lead her into the very heart of a deadly conspiracy. And once she stepped into that world, there would be no turning back. The web tightens. Rosa followed Tom more cautiously the next day, her heart pounding with each step she took. She told herself it was for his safety, that if she knew what he was involved in, maybe she could find a way to protect him. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her growing obsession with Tom was pushing her into a world she didn't belong in. She kept her distance as he moved through the city, blending in with the crowd. Eventually, Tom arrived at a large, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place was a grim reminder of a once thriving industrial district, now lost to decay. Rosa hesitated at the entrance, fear creeping up her spine. But her curiosity, mixed with the love she felt for Tom, pulled her forward. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was tense. The air was thick with the scent of dust and oil, and faint voices echoed from deep within. Rosa crouched behind a stack of crates, watching as Tom entered the building. He approached a group of men huddled around a table, all of them looking rough and dangerous. Rosa recognized one of them as the man from the night before. Her pulse quickened as she realized what was happening. Tom was a part of something much darker than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just some small-time operation. This was organized crime, and Tom was in the middle of it. But why? What had driven him to this dangerous life? Rosa's mind raced with questions, but none of them had answers. Tom seemed tense as he spoke to the group. But Rosa could see that Tom was different from them. There was something about the way he carried himself, something that told her he wasn't like them. Suddenly, one of the men looked around suspiciously, his gaze sweeping the area. Rosa froze, her heart thundering in her chest. She ducked lower, holding her breath, praying that she wouldn't be seen. She had no idea what they would do if they found her spying on them. After what felt like an eternity, the man's attention shifted back to the group. Rosa let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. But the moment was short-lived. As the men continued their discussion, one phrase caught Rosa's attention, sending a chill down her spine. "The raid's going down tomorrow night," one of the men said in a low voice. "We've got everything in place. No mistakes this time." Tom nodded, but Rosa could see the tension in his jaw. He didn't seem excited about whatever was happening. If anything, he looked like a man trapped in a situation far beyond his control. Rosa's heart sank as the realization hit her. Tom wasn't just involved in something illegal. He was planning a dangerous operation, and whatever it was, it would go down soon. She wanted to run, to leave this place and forget everything she had seen. But she couldn't. Tom was in too deep, and if she didn't do something, he might not make it out alive. Rosa made a decision then and there. She would confront him, even if it meant risking everything. As she slipped away from the warehouse, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had no idea what was waiting for her in the coming days, but one thing was certain. The web of secrets surrounding Tom was tightening, and Rosa was now caught in it. The confrontation. Rosa couldn't sleep that night. Her mind raced with the images of Tom in the warehouse, the dangerous men, and the whispered plans of a raid. She tossed and turned in her small, cramped corner of the shelter she called home, her heart aching with fear and confusion. How had she ended up here? How had her simple admiration for a kind-hearted officer turned into something so complicated and dangerous? As dawn broke, she made up her mind. Rosa couldn't wait any longer. She had to confront Tom and find out the truth, no matter the cost. Gathering her courage, she walked the familiar route to the park where she often saw him. Today, her steps felt heavier, her heart thudding in her chest as she prepared herself for what was to come. When she arrived, she spotted Tom sitting on a bench, staring out into the distance with a troubled expression on his face. He looked tired, worn down by something much larger than her simple presence in his life. She took a deep breath and approached him, her palms clammy, her throat dry. "Tom," she called softly. He turned, startled to see her. For a moment, his face lit up with a smile, but it quickly faded as the weight of his reality crashed back down. "Rosa," he replied, his voice tinged with surprise and something else, perhaps guilt. She sat beside him, the silence between them heavy. Rosa fidgeted with her hands, trying to find the words to begin. "I need to ask you something," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw you last night, at the warehouse." Tom stiffened, his eyes widening in shock. "You... what?" he stammered, his voice low and urgent. "I followed you," she confessed, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I needed to know what's going on, why you're always so distant, so secretive. And now..." I know. Tom was silent for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight with frustration. You shouldn't have done that, Rosa. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. Rosa's heart pounded in her chest. Then explain it to me. Help me understand. I thought I knew you, but now I don't know who you are anymore. What are you doing with those people? Tom sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. He looked around the park as if making sure no one was listening, then leaned closer to her. I'm involved in something dangerous, he admitted, his voice barely audible. But it's not what you think. I'm working undercover. Rosa blinked, her mind struggling to process his words. Undercover? For what? For the government, Tom continued, his voice steadying as he explained. I'm part of a special task force trying to bring down a criminal gang that's been operating in the city for years. The men you saw me with are part of that gang. They trust me, or at least they think they do, but I'm just biding my time, gathering information so we can take them down. Rosa stared at him, her heart swelling with both relief and fear. But you're in danger, she said, her voice trembling. I heard them talking about a raid. They're planning something, Tom, and it's happening soon. Tom nodded grimly. I know. That's why I've been so distant. I didn't want you to get involved in this mess. Tears welled in Rosa's eyes. But I am involved now. You've been kind to me, Tom, and I care about you. I can't just stand by and watch you risk your life. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. Rosa, I need you to stay out of this. It's dangerous, and I don't want you getting hurt. But it was too late for that. Rosa had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She wasn't going to let Tom face this alone, no matter the danger. The breaking point. Tom's words echoed in Rosa's mind as she walked away from the park, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had learned. He was undercover, working against the gang that had been haunting the city for years. He was trying to protect her by keeping her at a distance, but it only made her feel more connected to the danger surrounding him. Days passed, and Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She stayed away from Tom as he had asked, but her heart kept pulling her back. She knew too much now, and even though Tom had warned her, she couldn't abandon him. One evening, as she sat by the roadside, her thoughts consumed by Tom's secret life, she noticed a black car slowly pulling up near her. The windows were tinted, and it gave her an uneasy feeling. She shifted uncomfortably, her instincts telling her to move, but before she could react, the door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, with a stern face and cold eyes that sent a chill down her spine. Rosa's pulse quickened as the man approached her. Rosa, right? He asked in a low, gravelly voice. She hesitated, her body tensing. Yes, she answered cautiously, trying to gauge his intentions. The man's smile was tight, unfriendly. I've been hearing things about you. You're spending a lot of time with Officer Tom, aren't you? Rosa's heart nearly stopped. How did this man know about Tom? She shook her head, trying to play dumb. I don't know what you're talking about, she lied. The man's eyes narrowed and he stepped closer, making her feel trapped. Don't play games with me. You've been seen, and you're getting too close to things that don't concern you. Rosa's mind raced. She realized that Tom wasn't the only one being watched. She was under surveillance, too. This man must have been part of the gang Tom was investigating, and now they saw her as a threat. I don't know anything, she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. The man chuckled darkly, shaking his head. See, that's where you're wrong. You've seen too much, and now you're a liability. Fear gripped Rosa's chest, but she tried to stay calm. I won't say anything. I swear. The man's expression hardened, and he reached out, grabbing her arm tightly. You're going to do something for us, Rosa. You're going to keep your mouth shut and disappear. If you don't, I promise you Tom will suffer. Do you understand? Her breath caught in her throat. They were threatening Tom now. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about his safety, too. Rosa nodded shakily, her mind racing. "I understand," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Good," the man said, releasing her arm. "Remember, we're always watching." With that, he turned and walked back to the car, leaving Rosa standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. As the car drove away, she collapsed onto the sidewalk, her mind swirling with terror and confusion. She couldn't let this happen. She had to protect Tom, but how? She wasn't strong, she wasn't brave, she was just a beggar who had fallen in love with a man out of her reach. And now, her love for him was dragging them both into a nightmare. Rosa knew that she had to make a choice. She couldn't run away. But if she stayed, she would be putting both their lives at risk. The gang was on to her, and now Tom was in more danger than ever because of her. But one thing was clear. She couldn't let Tom face this alone. She had to do something, anything, to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing herself. The final decision. Rosa spent a sleepless night tossing and turning, her mind racing with thoughts of Tom and the danger that surrounded them. She had always felt powerless, but now she realized that the only way to fight back was to take matters into her own hands. The threats against Tom weighed heavily on her conscience. She couldn't just sit back and let things unfold. The following morning, Rosa made her way to the coffee shop where Tom usually grabbed his morning coffee before heading to work. She arrived early, hoping to catch him before his shift began. She knew she had to warn him about the man from the night before and the danger he faced. As she waited, anxiety twisted in her stomach. What would she say? Would he believe her? Just as her nerves threatened to overwhelm her, she spotted Tom walking toward the shop, his expression brightening when he saw her. "Rosa!" he called, a smile breaking across his face. She forced a smile back, but her heart raced. "Tom, we need to talk." He looked concerned as he joined her at a small table outside. "Is everything okay? You look a little pale." "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I saw someone last night. He said he was watching you. He's part of the gang, Tom. They know about us." Tom's smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. "What do you mean? Who did you see?" Rosa quickly recounted her encounter with the man, detailing how he had threatened her and hinted that she was a liability. As she spoke, Tom's brow furrowed deeper. "Rosa, this is serious," he said, his voice low and intense. "You shouldn't be getting involved with any of this. It's too dangerous." "I can't just walk away, Tom. They threatened you. I won't let them hurt you because of me," she insisted, her voice rising in desperation. Tom reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I appreciate you trying to protect me, but I can handle this. I'm trained to deal with these situations." "Trained or not, you can't do it alone," Rosa replied, her heart racing. "I love you, Tom. I won't let them take you away from me." Tom looked at her, his eyes softening. "Rosa, you don't understand the depths of this world. It's dangerous, and I can't risk your life for my own. You need to leave this behind." But Rosa shook her head fiercely. "No, I'm not going anywhere. I'll find a way to help you. I can't just sit back and let you fight this battle alone." For a moment, they both fell silent, each grappling with their emotions. The love they shared felt like a fragile thread hanging over a pit of darkness. Tom finally sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I can't let you put yourself in danger. But if you're determined to stay, then we need a plan. We have to gather information about the gang and find a way to take them down." Rosa's heart raced at the thought of working together, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. "What do we do first?" "We need to get into their territory, see what we can find. But I need you to promise me that you'll stay close and do exactly what I say. No heroics, okay?" "Okay," Rosa replied, her determination solidifying. "I promise." With a plan in place, Tom leaned in and kissed her forehead softly. I'll do everything I can to keep you safe. We'll get through this together." As they parted ways, Rosa felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. She had never been this close to danger before, but the love she felt for Tom pushed her to be brave. This was about more than just survival. It was about love, loyalty, and the fight against evil that threatened to tear them apart. But as the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that the gang would soon come for her. The stakes were higher than ever, and every decision they made would echo in the shadows of their lives. The dark turn. As Rosa and Tom moved deeper into their plan, they began to gather information about the gang's operations. They worked diligently, planning their approach carefully. With each passing day, Rosa felt the weight of the danger surrounding them, but she was fueled by her love for Tom and her determination to protect him. One evening, while they were poring over maps and notes in Tom's small apartment, Rosa discovered a pattern in the gang's activities. "Tom, look at this," she said, pointing to a cluster of locations marked on the map. "They always hit the same areas at specific times. If we can predict where they'll be, we can catch them off guard." Tom studied the map, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You might be onto something. If we can set up a meeting with some of their rivals, we could draw them out and get the information we need." Feeling a rush of excitement, Rosa suggested, "Let's use the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town as the meeting spot. It's secluded and we can control the situation better." "Good idea," Tom replied, nodding. "But we have to be careful. We can't underestimate them." As they finalized their plans, Rosa felt a sense of purpose wash over her. For the first time, she felt like she was truly fighting back against the threat that loomed over them. However, her exhilaration was short-lived. A nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach reminded her of the gang's ruthlessness. The night of the meeting arrived, and they positioned themselves in the shadows of the warehouse, their hearts racing with anticipation. Rosa clutched Tom's arm, her nerves heightened by the atmosphere. "What if they don't show up?" she asked, glancing around nervously. "They'll come," Tom assured her. "They're always looking for an opportunity. Just stay close to me." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Rosa's heart pounded as she peered through the cracks in the old wooden doors. A group of men approached, their voices low and threatening. Tom and Rosa exchanged worried glances, and Tom whispered, "Stay back." As the men entered the warehouse, Rosa's breath hitched in her throat. She recognized one of them, the same man who had threatened her before. Fear coursed through her veins, but she stayed hidden, knowing this was a crucial moment. The gang members gathered around a table, discussing their plans. Rosa strained to listen, trying to make sense of their conversation. They spoke of shipments and betrayals, their words dripping with malice. Just as she began to feel the urgency of the situation, she noticed movement behind her. A figure emerged from the shadows, a gang member she hadn't seen before moving toward her. Panic surged as she realized she had been spotted. "You!" he shouted, pointing directly at her. Rosa's heart raced as she turned to flee, but before she could escape, the man lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his grip tightening painfully. In a split second, Tom reacted, stepping out from behind the crates. "Let her go!" he shouted, anger flaring in his eyes. The gang members whipped around, their expressions shifting from surprise to aggression. "Looks like we have a couple of rats," one of them sneered, brandishing a weapon. Rosa's world spun as chaos erupted. Tom pushed her away from the group, his instincts kicking in. "Run!" he yelled, grabbing a nearby metal pipe and swinging it at the nearest gang member. Rosa hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the need to help Tom, but fear took over, and she sprinted toward the exit. As she dashed out into the night, she could hear shouts and the sounds of a scuffle behind her. Adrenaline coursed through her, and she ran until she could no longer hear the commotion. Once she reached the safety of the streetlights, she turned back, panic gripping her heart. "Tom!" she screamed, hoping he would follow her. But there was only silence. The weight of dread settled over her as she stood alone. She felt a mixture of guilt and terror. She had left him behind, and now she had no idea what was happening to him. Rosa's thoughts raced. She had to find a way back to him, but the fear of the gang's retribution loomed large. She knew that they wouldn't let this slide. Tom had fought back, and they would come after him, after both of them. As she stood there, frozen with fear, a car pulled up beside her. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a familiar face. "Rosa, get in!" It was a police officer, part of the undercover operation she had heard about from Tom. "We need to get you to safety." Without hesitation, Rosa jumped into the car, her heart pounding. "What about Tom?" she cried, desperate for answers. "Tom's in danger. We need to secure you first, and then we'll find him," the officer replied, urgency lacing his voice. "Please, I need to do something," she insisted. Reluctantly, the officer agreed. Together, they devised a plan to lure the gang into a trap, with Rosa acting as bait. She stepped onto the quiet streets, her heart pounding as memories of Tom flooded her mind. Suddenly, gunshots erupted. Rosa ducked behind a car, panic rising as she spotted a gang member. In the chaos, she saw the man who had threatened her before. Filled with rage, he raised his weapon and aimed it directly at her. "No!" an officer shouted as he tried to shield her, but Rosa instinctively pushed him away. Pain shot through her side as she crumpled to the ground, darkness closing in. In her final moments, she thought of Tom, their dreams, their love, before everything faded to black. Later, as Tom fought to dismantle the gang responsible for her death, he stood before Rosa's grave, grief heavy on his shoulders. "I'm sorry, Rosa," he whispered, vowing to honor her memory by ensuring no one else would suffer the same fate. The story of a beggar's love for an armed man echoed through the streets, a reminder of love's fragility and the tragic price it sometimes demands.